Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us. This webinar is about what a NALP examiner is looking for. So we're going to get sort of push back the curtain a little bit and let you into a few secrets of what a NALP examiner will be looking for if you're placing an assignment forward for marking and so on. My name is Chantal Cook. I'm one of the directors of NALP. Joining us on this webinar is Jane Robson, who's the CEO of NALP. Nigel Davey, who looks after all our marketing, and Amanda Hamilton, who is our former CEO and current patron, and who will be answering the questions today as well. So I've got a number of questions I'm going to put to Amanda. She's going to answer, hopefully do her best to answer them. If you've got any questions that relate directly to the questions, to things like about what NALP examiners are looking for, then please do pop them in the chat. So don't, if you could ask you not to kind of shout them out loud or whatever, or to interrupt or something, because sometimes you'll find that actually we're going to get to that question anyway. But if you could pop them in the chat, any time that works for you, hasn't got to be, you know, at the end or anything like that, just pop them in as you think of them, and then we'll either answer them as we go, or we've got time at the end for some questions as well. Also, just to let you know, this is our last webinar before the summer break. We're having a little bit of time off over the summer. And we'll be back in September with another few webinars taking us up till Christmas. Now, I can't tell you what they're going to be at this stage because Nigel is doing a survey, which I think he's just put a link into the chat there. And he's basically wants to know what you guys would like us to do future webinars on. So if you've got a topic or something you'd really like us to cover, then please do let us know, and then we'll make sure that we cover those in the next few webinars when we come back in the autumn. Okay, let's get started then. So Amanda is going to be answering our questions today about what NALP examiners are looking for. So obviously the first question I have to ask you is, what is the first thing that a NALP examiner would look for when a learner submits an assignment?
Well, the first thing that when a learner submits an assignment through the centre, the first thing an examiner is going to look at is to see whether the word count has been exceeded or not. So word count is very important. Please try to stick within the allotted count. That will be hopefully on your front sheets. The second thing that the examiner will be looking at is whether the learner has understood the question and can identify the topic correctly.
This is the top two things really: word count, which is very important, and then, as you say, have you identified the question properly, and is that kind of what you're answering? Okay, so then from the learner's point of view, what can we do to facilitate that? I guess word count is just make sure you don't go over it. But as for the second part, what things can we do to help as a learner to facilitate actually achieving that?
Well, from a learner's viewpoint, the most important thing is to familiarize yourself with the content of the course. That means the content of the workbook, and that in turn means you should really read it through a number of times to familiarize yourself with it. And this will assist you, hopefully, in recognizing what the question is about. The second thing that a learner can do, which helps as a guideline, is to download the qualification specification. Now, this qual spec, as we call it, contains not only the learning outcomes, but also contains the assessment criteria. And the assessment criteria is what the assignment questions are based on. And don't forget also that the qual spec has within it indicative content. So that will give you huge guidelines as to what kind of thing that you should put in your answer. In other words, it gives you tips really on how to approach the answer. So those are the things that you can do. And also remember that the question is very important. You've got to read the question very, very carefully. Now, sometimes, you know, you can read the question and miss out the fact that it may be in several parts. And so very great care has to be taken to understand what it is the examiner is asking you.
I think it's interesting you say that, because I think we're all guilty of reading things quite fast and then thinking we know what it is. And actually, I think for those kind of assignment questions, it is particularly important to read it again, and then probably read it again as well, and see if you can break it down like that, so you make sure you're not missing anything, because it would be a real shame if you knew the content and knew the answer but didn't give it because you hadn't read the question properly. So I think that really is an important thing to remember, isn't it? Understand the question first, then structure your answer.
Yes.
So generally, though, apart from this, obviously understanding the question, which is clearly very important, what are some of the other pitfalls that learners may encounter when they're answering assignment questions?
Well, as we just to reiterate, if a learner kicks off by misunderstanding what the question is about, they're on a hiding to nothing, really, because clearly if they've misunderstood the question or failed to recognize what the examiner is looking for, then the whole of the question is thrown out of the window and perhaps no marks will be allocated. But the other thing is to answer all parts of the question. Now, on numerous occasions, a learner might say, oh, yes, I recognize what that is about. They then go ahead and write all they know about it and fail to recognize that actually there's a second part to that question. For example, in contract law, it might say, what are the requirements necessary to make a contract valid? Oh, yes, I know the answer to that. But there's other part of it, and excuse me, and describe the remedies that may be available if there is a breach of contract. So they miss out the second part of the question completely. So it's incredibly important to make sure that, as you said earlier, Chantal, that the question is read several times. Now, the other pitfall that may occur is that the learner may have recognized what the question is about, realized that the question's in two parts, but then have failed to apply it to the facts. In other words, the scenario. The question might be, advise Bob about what makes a contract a valid contract and what remedies are available. And what they see is valid contract requirements, remedies, write all about that, but then fail to advise Bob. So that is another thing that is a pitfall that quite often can occur with an assignment question.
So again, what's interesting here is, in a way, it all relates back, doesn't it, to reading that question. It's like, yes, it seems like all roads lead to read the question really, really carefully. So apart from reading the question, is there anything else that learners should be aware of that an NALP examiner would be looking for when they're reading an assignment?
Yes, there is. Now, answering legal assignment questions is very difficult in itself. There's a lot to bear in mind, and there are a lot of definitions and a lot of statutory definitions and so on. But one thing that an examiner is very hot on at NALP is what we call plagiarism, and that is that the learner has to be very much aware that the answers they give must be in their own words and not lifted or copied and pasted from anywhere else. And that not only includes the course workbooks, but anything online they may encounter about it, because NALP examiners do have plagiarism software and they can pick up on this very easily. Now, plagiarism is something that is a very serious, is reacted to in a very serious way, and it could affect the learner's marks, but not only that, it could, if there's sufficiently greater percentage of plagiarism in their answer, give them a complete fail straight away on that assignment. So it's very important that if you are struggling with answering the question, you should try and put things in your own words as best as possible. Now, there are going to be times when you can't do that, because a definition is a definition, and sometimes you need to quote that wherever the quote is from the course workbook or wherever. And that is fine to do one line, a couple of lines in quotation marks with a citation next to it. In other words, put in brackets where you got the quote from. That is fine. What examiners are really hot on is where a learner may have lifted whole paragraphs from the course material or from various websites. So please, please, please make sure that you're aware of that. And if you're struggling as a learner, then approach your centre for help and advice. Now, the centre can't tell you what to write, but can assist you in trying to understand how to put things in your own words, not exactly what to put, but how to go about it.
Because I guess there's a limit to, although yes, you can quote things and you can give the source and all those kind of things, what you don't want is basically an answer which is just lots of sourced quotes.
Precisely. I mean, one of the examiners are just looking for several things. They're looking for the fact that you've understood the question, and in your own words, you understand what to write about. And that's all they're interested in. They're not interested in clever academic answers. They just want to know that you are on the road to understanding what the question is about and understanding what the nature of the answer should be. Now, that's all they're looking for. And if there are quotes, huge paragraphs lifted from this website or that course material, then the examiner cannot possibly say that you have understood what you're writing about, because it's not your own words. So that is very, very important.
And then you mentioned just there briefly about speaking to the college if you had any questions or whatever. Does that kind of apply? I suppose what I'm asking is, what kind of assistance is there available? Is it more than just that, or
well,
I mean, it's kind of, I suppose what I'm trying to say is, how do I help myself do the things that you've been talking about?
Well, there are a number of ways you can help yourself to do what we've just been talking about. Number one is to make sure that you read the course material, the workbook thoroughly. Number two is, I mean, clearly when you're reading through, there's going to be some things you may not understand, and that's fair enough. Number two, when it comes to your assignment, make sure you understand the assignment. Now, this is where your centre, your college, your training provider may be able to assist. May be able to assist in understanding an area of the course material about certain parts of the law that you don't understand, can help you decipher what a question is asking you, can give you some help on examining assignment technique, things like that. But of course, you've got to remember that the centre does not have access to what the examiner, the NALP examiners have. And the NALP examiners are all independent assessors, but they have a marking scheme, and your centre does not have access to that marking scheme. So whatever goes on with the centre, there's only a limit to how they can help you. And as I say, that limit is vast in itself, to help you understand an area of law, to help you understand what a question is about, to assist you with this assignment technique. And that is all very, very useful for a learner.
Well, thank you very much. Is there anything else you feel you'd like to add that I maybe haven't remembered to ask you, just to give any kind of final top tips to learners if they've got an assignment coming up?
I think there is no, you can't really emphasize enough the importance of reading the course material. And as I have just said, there may be areas that you can't understand, in which case you can get your centre to help you understand those areas. But reading through the course material, familiarizing yourself as much as possible with that, will help you when it comes to looking at the assignment questions to know and recognize the topics that the question is asking you about. And for that, you can get the assistance of the qualification specification, which I think is a very useful tool. And the other tip was just to reiterate again, try as much as you can to put everything into your own words, because that's what the examiner is looking for. The examiner can say, by reading your answer, this learner has understood what the question is about. This learner may not be totally precise academically, but they know what the topic is and they're doing their best to answer it. And that's what it's all about, really.
And I suppose it's like, as you said, these examiners are very experienced. They mark, you know, dozens and dozens and dozens of these assignments, you know, all the time. So they kind of, they must have a pretty good understanding of, I've seen that before, or this doesn't feel like the person has got it. And also very clearly understand when somebody has got it, definitely.
Absolutely, absolutely. All the NALP examiners are independent specialists in their particular area. So, and some are university professors, and some have been examiners for many, many years. So they can all recognize when a learner is on the right track, most definitely.
Lovely. Thank you so much for answering all these questions. I hope everybody's found that really useful. So we're going to do our usual system. I'm going to pass over to Nigel to have a look and let me know if there's any questions that you'd like answered. And then hopefully Amanda can jump in and give you the information that you need.
A couple of people have sort of commented around what's included in the word count. So things like cover page, footnotes. If the questions, would those things be counted in the word count, or would they be very carefully taken out?
I think when we're giving somebody an idea of word count, there is a 5%, you know, differential, you know, either way. If you're putting the question in as well as the answer, I think we can say that the question doesn't matter. But, you know, we're talking about an average word count amounting to this. I think it's 7,000 words for some assignments, maybe slightly less for others, off the top of my head. Now, with that, what we're trying to avoid is somebody answering a question that runs into 10 or 15,000 words. And so there is a little bit of leeway either way. So, you know, we're not taking it too literally. So if you finish your assignment question and realize you've got 7,550 words instead of 7,500, don't be too vexed about it, is what we're saying.
Okay, and that sort of answers, there was another question about if you put too much in there, would you end up being penalized for that?
Well, it depends what you mean by too much. I mean, if we're talking about 5,000 words over the count, then yes, that would probably be too much. And your assignment may well be sent back to cull those words. But, you know, I wouldn't get too hung up on the word count, because while we are quite strict about it, there is a little bit, as I said earlier, a little bit of leeway over it.
Okay, and then the other sort of question that actually I quite like this one, about adding personal opinions or observations as comments in and parts of the answer. How are those treated?
Well, it depends whether they're relevant or not. I mean, we have to understand that the examiner has a marking scheme, and so certain things have to be answered in a certain, well, have to be mentioned, presumably. But there are, I believe, there's a little bit of leeway for an examiner to add a mark here and there if there is a commentary that makes sense and is reasonable. So any other comments that are applicable may give you an extra mark. But it really depends what we're talking about here. You know, it's got to be relevant to the answer.
Okay, sounds good. I don't think there's been any other real questions added to that at the moment. So thank you.
Lovely. Well, I think that covers everything. So thank you so much to everybody for joining us today. And I do hope you found this webinar useful. We'll probably do another one of these in a similar kind of vein sometime in the new year, especially as the new qualifications and things come online as well. So look out for that too. So we're having a little break over the summer. So there'll be no more webinars in July and August, but we'll be back in the autumn with more webinars. Please do fill in the survey. Nigel put a link in the chat, but it'll also be sending out an email as well to members. So if there's something you'd like us to cover, a particular webinar you'd like us to do, then let us know and we'll put that into the schedule. In the meantime, I'd like to say just thank you very much for joining us. Have a lovely rest of your afternoon, and let's hope the sun peeps its head out. At least where I am, I'm hoping it's going to peep its head out soon. So take care, everybody. Have a lovely, lovely afternoon. Thank you so much to Amanda for answering the questions, for Jane for joining us, for Nigel for looking after the questions and the tech side of it, and for all of you for giving up your half hour this lunchtime to come and join the NALP webinar. And we'll see you next time, we hope. Thanks very much then. Bye-bye.